Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our cybersecurity threat prevention webinar today here with Avanti. So we have Morten Gammelgaard from Avanti. He's their patching expert. He will be presenting the webinar today. We will also be joined by Kay Heath, who is our virtualization and EUC specialist at Bytes at the end of the webinar, and she will just be talking about the free of charge patch management assessment that we're offering.
Okay, brilliant. So thanks very much, Amy. So welcome to the Cybersecurity Threat Prevention seminar with Bytes Software. My name is Morten Gammelgaard. I'm the security specialist for the EMEA North region with Avanti. And we're going to be talking about the security market in general and what is happening there and how patching, application control and whitelisting is becoming more important now as a means to mitigate a lot of those threats that are out there at the moment. So looking at the security market today, things are changing very fast in our world today, and in terms of security we have a perfect storm brewing. So to explain that a little bit further, within the last 3 to 5 years we've seen a drastic change to the economy. We've seen some cultural changes and the world is becoming far more global. And from a technology perspective, things are evolving very, very fast as well. So there's all of these new technologies that are essentially coming out there that you need to consider from a security perspective. So all of these new technologies like VDI and cloud-based computing and Windows 10 and file sharing and application virtualization, things like Dropbox, are changing the way that users and companies are working, but are also changing the way you have to think about things from a security perspective. And also on the user side of things, things are changing very quickly. There is now a new generation of young people coming into the workplaces that have a slightly different way of working. So they like to go about things in their own way. They don't traditionally, or they don't necessarily work the traditional way by going through IT. They like to look into problems themselves, find the applications and the tools that they need to be productive within their work. So again, that is another rethink for IT in general and for security to consider. And then security is becoming more and more critical. We've seen a huge proliferation in the number of attacks that keeps escalating year over year, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. But what we're seeing specifically is that the attacks are getting very, very targeted, and the number of them are escalating, very, very quickly. And it's all driven by money. There's a lot of money to be gained by the malware authors and the hackers out there. And again, I'll touch a little bit on that in this presentation as well. So the driver for this, that it's simply very profitable for the bad guys to keep continuing to do this. And from a security perspective, what is becoming more and more clear is that your security is only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. And at the moment, it is really the end user that is the weakest link in that chain, and that is what the endpoint and the end user is what's being targeted when it comes to malware at the moment. So all of these changes are leading to the unfortunate events that are happening all the time. So the number of breaches that we are seeing and the number of companies that publicly have to go out and announce that they have had data breaches is increasing quite significantly. In the US alone, from 2015 to 2016, we went from 206 publicly disclosed data breaches to 501. So we more than doubled the number of public data breaches in the US. There's actually a site that is tracking all of this called Information is Beautiful. And this particular site will track all of the data breaches. It's very interesting because you can go in and hover over each of them and see how the attack happened and how it could potentially have been prevented as well. So in general, all cyber attacks are on the rise, whether you're looking at malware, phishing, or attacks to steal financial information or intellectual property. Ransomware has evolved from simply a scary hack today to an enterprise-grade, nearly unbeatable malware that holds computers hostage and locks down entire systems. The FBI estimated that in 2016, criminals collected 209 million in revenue just from ransomware. This is coming from CNN Money, that was running some surveys and some data on this. And essentially, they estimate that in 2017 we could get to about 1.5 billion by the end of the year in terms of ransoms paid out by companies. So all of the top security threats, malware, phishing, cyber attacks are on the rise. And one of the reasons for this big uptake is that it's become very easy for the cyber attackers to do this today. So there's exploit kits out there that simplify cyber attacks even for an inexperienced hacker. And these malicious toolkits often will come with pre-written exploit code and require no knowledge really of how it works. So it's becoming increasingly easy for people to do it. And we're also seeing that there's many more vulnerabilities open, and there's still a lot of vulnerabilities out there that remain open because security patches were never implemented. If we look at the ransomware trending, it's very clear that there's an absolute explosion. This has really not changed very much, and it's still happening similarly to what happened before we changed into the new millennium. So a CEO from Across Security is they've been breaking in to customer networks for 16 years as a pen testing companies, and they're still following the same recipe that they did 18 years ago. They find a public exploit that is less than 4 months old. They tailor that exploit to work with their remote administration tool. Then they start mutating that exploit until the virus engines don't recognize it anymore. And finally, they go after the end user. Another scary trend that's happening at the moment is that we're seeing a huge uptake in fileless attacks. So fileless attacks are going up by 33%. And the issue with this is that it makes it very difficult for a traditional antivirus to detect if there's no file that they can do pattern recognition on. So there's no ID or there's no identity to be scanned for. So you really need to start looking into technologies that can focus on memory exploit protection, script analysis, and more behavioral detection rather than just the file-based detection if you want to protect from this part of the new threat. The weakest link out there still is the end user. So the end user is the quickest way for any hacker to get into a corporate network. An attacker, it's easier for an attacker basically to have somebody open the door rather than find a way to pick the lock. So this particular diagram shows the Microsoft releases from 2016 and total bulletins released each month, and how many of these vulnerabilities that target an end user. So you need patching to plug those vulnerabilities, and you can reduce the surface attack quite significantly with patching and also using application control. So application control will complement the patching by defending against the zero-day threats and the fileless attacks and the memory injections. And of course, it will also help with the vulnerabilities that you couldn't patch because you have an exception within your environment or a limitation that doesn't allow you to deploy that particular patch. Also, with privilege management, you can have a mitigating impact. So basically, vulnerabilities, a lot of these vulnerabilities, when they're exploited, allows the attacker to operate in the context of the user. So if I hack an end user in your company that has admin privileges, I have admin privileges and I can get round to all of the other systems unless you have some sort of preventative mechanisms in place to deny me from doing that. But by putting privilege management in place and operating on a basis of least privileges for the end user, you can basically you can reduce the attacker's ability to operate within your environment and slowing their ability to move around from machine to machine on the network. So all in all, your security risk is higher than ever. The hackers can basically go out and buy off the shelf as a service option attacks for less than $20 a month. We're seeing that 40% that all of the spam now contains ransomware, and 1 in 2 executives have experienced a ransomware attack. A lot of companies are addressing this and making more IT security budget available, which is a good thing. But most companies are behind the curve in terms of where the threat is now and what investment is needed to keep up with it. And really, you cannot afford to be wrong on this particular one. So 93% of data breaches compromises an organization within a minute or less. And a lot of these attacks include ransomware. And of all of the businesses that are hit by ransomware, 70%, according to IBM, end up paying the ransomware. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in 2016, we already went across $1 billion in ransom extraction by the criminals, and that's said to be somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion, I should imagine, for 2017. So what is interesting is today in many organizations, security and IT operations are working as separate units and are not necessarily cooperating very well together. But that scenario basically could make your organization much more vulnerable to cyber attacks. If there's a lack of synergy between IT operations and security, it's harder for you to detect things. What if the security team discovers a breach, for example, but your IT ops team is slow to react to it? How much opportunity will the hackers and malware have there to do damage? Or what about if IT ops corrects an application failure that is actually a system hack? I mean, these are the things that needs to be considered, and these disciplines need to be brought closer together and working much closer together at the endpoint to try and counter what's happening from a security threat. Landesk, before we became Ivanti, actually we commissioned the Chertoff Group, which is a global advisory company, to survey 100 CIOs and CSOs, and this was done in October 2016. So this is very relevant and very new information. We basically asked them to go out and determine what they considered to be the most important security challenge in managing their endpoints today. And what became clear from interviewing a lot of these CIOs and CSOs is that that there's a desire to redefine IT operations and security, and there's a clear understanding of the benefits of bringing these two operations together under one strategy. So you basically need security and IT operations to work smoothly together at the endpoint to be more effective in protecting. It also revealed an awareness and a need for simpler, more focused security solutions. Okay, so I'm going to talk now a little bit about compliance and regulations and how the landscape is changing there and how that relates to patching as well. So there's a number of frameworks out there that your organization may be using or have to comply to, and I've just shown some of them on this screen. Some are global, some relates to the US, and there's some very specific to the UK. So Cyber Essentials, the public service network, are specific to the UK, and GDPR is an EU regulation that is going to be enforced in May 2018. And Some of these frameworks are hundreds of pages of long, and they're not particularly clear. I'll touch a little bit on a couple of them and what they say around patching in a second. But what we are finding is that the Center for Internet Security have released the CSC, so the Critical Security Controls. These are 20 security controls that really should be implemented by all companies. And that's a prioritized list of focused actions. And these actions are based on experience with actual attacks. And they have even been kind enough to produce a, sorry, wrong way here, a top 5 list. So if you do nothing else, these should be the first 5 controls that you're looking at. So these 5 will establish a solid foundation for radically improving your organization's security posture. So you need to do inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices, inventory of authorized and unauthorized software, and these are very critical. If you don't do this, you may be flying blind and you don't know what you're protecting against. You need to have secure configuration of the end user devices in place. So privilege management and application management can help in this area. And then you need continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation. So use a vulnerability scanner from the likes of Qualys, Nessus, Rapid7, and then use a patching tool, an automated one preferably, for remediation of all of the endpoints, so you can do that in a timely manner. And basically, if you implement all of these controls in your environment, it has been shown to eliminate 80 to 95% of all the known security vulnerabilities. So you can reduce the attack surface very, very drastically. So just one example of what has happened here. So in November 2013, Phasio Mechanical, which is a heating and air conditioning company in Pennsylvania, suffered a breach with malware. So this malware was delivered in an email, and in that intrusion, the thieves managed to steal the virtual private network credentials for that the Phasio technicians used to remotely connect to the network. This allowed the attackers basically to penetrate the network, where they were able to eventually place malware on an unpatched point of sales device and steal about 40 million credit card and debit card numbers. So the target of this attack later hired a consultant from Verizon to help them identify the weaknesses in their systems and to understand what led to the breach. And the conclusion was that they basically had weak and default passwords in place and very inconsistent patching. And in this case, all 5 of the security controls from the list from CIS would have helped dramatically in preventing this attack from happening in the first place. So looking a little bit more specifically at the individual individual compliance, I should say rather, if we start with cybersecurity essentials. From a patching perspective, it is very clear on what you need to do. So point 2, you need to apply updates, including operating systems and firmware, on all the computers in your network that are connected or capable of connecting to the internet, and they should be installed in a timely manner within 30 days of the release or when they become available from the vendors. If it is a security patch, that goes down to within 14 days, and there are not that many companies out there that are able to actually do this within a 14-day work span. What is interesting is that there's a ton of companies out there. If you had attended RSA in January, the big security show out in San Francisco, 2017 January, there's all of these new security vendors that pop up every year, and each and every one of them talk about how important patching is and how it is to do the basic prevention. None of them really do much about patching, but they all claim to have this single bullet that will lead to better security. And I've listed on this slide just a number of these. But if you have to install best-of-breed solutions in 15 or 20 different areas, it can very easily become expense in depth rather than defense in depth. So it is important to start looking at vendors that are capable of managing more of these threats together and combine them to make your prevention and defenses a little bit more robust before you start investing in some of these silver bullets that can often be circumvented anyway if you don't close your vulnerabilities and if you give admin rights to users and if you don't control what applications are running in your environment. So that was a little bit about the security market, what is happening, what has changed, and what you need to look at, and talking about compliance and regulation as well. So let's talk a little bit about Ivanti and our approach to security. So with the Ivanti portfolio, what we really preach to all of our customers is that discovery is the first point. You need to be easily able to find and quantify all of the assets in your environment that you need to secure. If you cannot do that today, you will be flying blind and you don't really know what you're protecting against and when you need to apply different things in your environment. So you need good discovery tools to find everything that's within your network. You need to be able to provide insight, so do proper reporting and dashboard and clearly identify the risk in your environment. And once those two steps has happened, then you need to take action and you need to decide which are the best of breed tools that I need to have in my environment and roll out to provide protection. So with us, it is all about prevention and protection in the first place, detecting what's running in your environment, then responding, then understanding, well, it really starts with the understanding of what's in your environment, then the prevention, then detection, and then responding to it. So without good asset management, there is not necessarily a single source of truth within your environment. You won't have necessarily the right change history or change of false positives. So you need to have all of these things in place, and then as a solution, you must start with a good foundation and basically build from there. So from a patching perspective individually, what needs to be considered? So most companies today need to consider the business demand for 24/7 operations. The websites and all of the data needs to be available constantly. And a lot of IT teams struggle to get the necessary testing time and the tools and the resources and the change windows from the application business stakeholders to do this. So patching is not just an operation task. It involves the business line owners and security, and you need to build processes around that within the company. So if you have a lack of visibility in your environment and you really have no idea what is installed throughout the environment, you need a tool that can help you with this, and we can provide that for you. Windows 10 in itself introduces a new patch management model. So before, on Patch Tuesday, you could pick and choose the updates that you want to implement in your environment. Today, a lot of those updates are cumulative, and in the last Patch Tuesday, it was 6 or 7 updates that were all tied together. So you do all of them or you do none. And if you do none, there's obviously significant security risk, and if you do all of them, there's many considerations and things that needs to go into place before you can implement all of them. So you need to improve all the patch management processes. Without a plan that addresses all of the people and the tools, you may waste money and further entrench the organization in different IT domains where they end up having conflicting processes in place. And that obviously is not a good scenario. And then finally, you need to balance your patching requirements with agility and system availability and stability. So looking at it in a slightly different manner, you need to consider your data center. How do you want to patch your physical servers? How do you want to patch your virtual servers? Are there any special considerations you need to take for your virtual environment? Offline machines and templates spring to mind here. You also need to consider the endpoints, how you patch those. Do you want to patch via SCCM and WSUS for the endpoints? Do you want something with more scheduling, reporting, and reboot options in the data center over and what SCCM and WSUS can offer you? Do you potentially want to, not potentially, but how do you implement both the Windows patches and all of the third-party and other OS patches in your environment? And do you have any considerations in your environment? So do you have a lot of different sites? What are the bandwidth links like? Is it a very heterogeneous environment? So all of these areas need to be considered. You cannot really afford to treat patch management as a standalone function. You need to make sure that you have realistic metrics in place for patching of desktop servers, databases, middleware and applications, and even clusters and load balancers as well. So automation and control over how this process happens is going to be increasing. It is very important already, but it's going to be increasingly important going forward, just because of the simple fact that the number of third-party patches is on a fast rising curve. If the problem is not untenable for you today from a manual perspective, it will be maybe 6 months from now or 12 months from now. The problem is not going to get smaller. You would also benefit if you have a tool that you can integrate with your other vulnerability tools like vulnerability scanners from Nessus, Rapid7 or Qualys. So if you can take the list of CVEs produced from your vulnerability scanner and import them into your patching tool, you lessen the workload on the operational team very quickly. There's also platform considerations. So what do I do with Windows? What do I do with Mac? And what do I do with Linux? And these are some of the reasons why patching is not a simple, easy task that you can keep turning your back on. It is the #1 recommendation for pretty much anybody that has anything to do with security today to bring patching under control. So if your processes are not very good today, we very much recommend that you come have a chat with us or with Bytes and learn a little bit more about what we can do. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about if you're using SCCM today, how you can expand that patch capability. So we have a product called...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm really sorry about this. I've got a slight issue in that my computer's about to restart and there's nothing I can do about it. So we've got 5 minutes remaining and then it will close down the webinar. Is that enough time? And then if we'll cut Q&A. If you do have any questions, I'll send an email with a link to the recording after, so please respond to me, and we'll also send you some information about the patch management assessments. I'm really sorry about this, but there's not much we can do here. I hope that's okay.
Okay, I'll be really quick then. So with Ivanti Patch for SCCM, with SCCM and WSUS today, you can only patch the Windows stuff. There's still a number of Windows applications and OSs that you cannot patch, and there's a lot of third-party tools that Windows does nothing about. In fact, 86% of all the vulnerabilities that we see today is coming from third-party applications. Slightly different way of viewing it. If you look below the red arrow, that is what you can patch with WSUS and SCCM. The middle layer is all of the Microsoft OS and applications that is not patched by WSUS. And then, of course, the third-party patches listed at the top, Microsoft does nothing about at all. So with Ivanti Patch for SCCM, we provide a very extensive software catalog with more than 2,000 OSs and applications in there. We have a native plugin into SCCM, so you just run a simple executable and your SCCM console will populate with a couple of extra lines, and from now on you can then publish any of the patches in the catalog that we provide. Because we are a native plugin into SCCM, there is no additional infrastructure required. You don't need another server or another console. Everything runs on the back of the SCCM console and the agent on your endpoints. We will populate your compliance reporting in SCCM with all of the updates that we bring to the table, Microsoft and third party. We are very, very easy to install. It's a simple 3-step process if you have SCCM and WSUS already talking to each other today. And finally, we pre-test all of the packages. We release patches every Tuesday and every Thursdays or twice as frequently as any of the other patch vendors on the market, and we have a 24-hour SLA if there's any out-of-band updates that comes out in between those cycles. And we have a large test bed of physical and virtual machines on which we test all the OSs and all of the applications that we release to you. So finally, you may need to consider whether you want to do something differently on the servers to the workstations. So in the data center, there may be some other considerations. Do you need more control over scheduling, reboot options, and reports? If you do, we have a standalone called Ivanti Patch for Servers, which is the old Schaeffler Protect product. This standalone tool installed on a Windows server, so it is an on-premise tool. It installed on a Windows server, physical or virtual, and will do Windows OS, Mac OS, and third-party application patch management. In the data center, we will do agentless patching, so that's a huge benefit. There is no performance degradation. If you're running VMware, we will also patch the ESXi and ESX and ESXi hosts that are running all the virtual machines. So if there's any VMware bulletins, we can patch those. We can also patch any online machine. So if you have a VM that is online, we see that as a physical machine. But what about the offline machines and the templates? Those are the ones that cause issue from a patching perspective because they're not frequently updated. And when you bring them online or you bring a new server online, that template may be 6 to 12 months out of date and essentially missing up to 12 months worth of patching. What we do is we can talk directly to vCenter. We can read out the VMDKs, so the virtual machine files themselves. We can then, if patches are missing, disconnect that virtual machine from the network, spin it up in a sandboxed environment, apply the patches, verify that the patches have been applied, and we can then, after that has happened, reconnect it back to the original network settings. We also allow you to take snapshots, so you can snapshot your virtual environment before you roll patches out, and should anything go wrong, you have disaster recovery built into your patching strategy. Same for physical servers, and for that matter for workstations and laptops. You can choose between agent and agentless on those. Most customers run 95% agentless because it's much easier. You can start immediately. As soon as you've installed on the server, you can start remediating your environment because you don't have to roll agents out. But there is a couple of scenarios where an agent will make sense. Server sitting in a DMC behind the firewall with no internet connection. We cannot get to that with agentless patching, so put an agent on those. The other scenario is the laptop users. So laptop users that are off the network are normally missed out on a patch cycle. With our agent technology, when you have the agent on that laptop, whenever that laptop connects to the internet from home, Starbucks, or a hotel Wi-Fi, it goes up to Schaeffler and says, are there any updates available for this user? They will then be pulled down directly from the vendors and deployed silently in the background